and they all lived happily ever after. The end. Are the kids asleep? Good. Now let's talk about the really messed up stuff that happened to your favorite Disney heroes in their original stories and after the films themselves. What happy ending is more famous than Cinderella's? Seeing a lifelong victim of emotional abuse and borderline slavery overcome her awful family's influence and find happiness with a prince is about as sweet and satisfying as an ending can get. I guess you could argue she's being a bit impulsive by getting married to the prince she just met, but they said she lived happily ever after, right? That's consistent with the original Cinderella fairy tale written by Charles Perrault in the late 17th century, which is the version the Disney film was based on. This ending actually went one step further by having Cinderella's stepfamily grovel for her forgiveness, taking an ending from happy to downright cathartic. So, let's just be glad they didn't adopt the Brothers Grimm version. In this version, instead of being nicknamed Cendrillon, French for Little Ashes, Cinderella is nicknamed Aschenputtel, meaning Ash Fool. Both of these nicknames are based on her being covered in ashes from cleaning all the time, but Ash Fool goes one step further by essentially saying, you're not just dirty, you're stupid. It's made worse when you consider that it's like Lord Farquaad's name from Shrek, where if you say it too fast, it sounds like you're calling her a swear word. I'll let you figure out which one.
Lord Farquaad? No.
Anyway, another difference in the Grimm Brothers' version is that instead of a fairy godmother, Cinderella meets some friendly magical doves from heaven. Well, they're friendly to good-natured people like Cinderella and the prince, not so much with the bad guys. The stepsisters tried to deceive the prince into believing they were the ones who fit the glass slipper, and their mom, believing they would have no reason to walk once they became queens, advised them to mutilate their own feet to try and fit into the slipper.
It fits?
Mother of the Year, everybody. Thankfully, the magical doves warned the prince of their deception because this prince apparently cannot see the color red. While no harm was done to anything but the stepsisters' feet, those birds must have taken this treachery very personally. They would proceed to peck out the stepsisters' eyes at Cinderella's wedding. That would be like if the fairy godmother just came in during the final scene, broke the stepsisters' kneecaps, and left. Weddings can be stressful, especially if you're a Disney heroine, apparently. Enter Ariel. Similarly to the movie, The Little Mermaid's original story follows the titular hero as she strives to become a human. Her motives, however, are pretty different. In the movie, Ariel is simply fascinated by human culture and wants to explore dry land and be part of that world. In this version, she just wants an immortal soul, which for the mermaid can only be obtained by seducing a man to fall in love with her. On top of the sea witch literally cutting out her tongue to remove her voice, the Little Mermaid is threatened to either marry the prince or die and turn into sea foam.
You belong to me.
Because the prince somehow forgot the face of the mermaid who saved his life, she seems doomed to the latter fate. That is, until her sisters reveal that they gave their hair to the sea witch to give her one last chance at survival. Basically, if Ariel kills the prince, she'll be spared. But Ariel is unable to bring herself to do this, so while she isn't turned into sea foam, her refusal to commit murder results in her becoming a daughter of the air, a spirit who can earn a soul by doing good deeds for 300 years. That's just mean, honestly. Like, she just refused to kill a guy, knowing full well she would die as a result of this. Shouldn't that be enough to give her a happy ending? Well, to be fair, even the original movie's ending isn't that happy when you think about it. A lot of people interpret the original fairy tale as a lesson for little girls to not throw their entire life away for a man who might not even love them.
Children got to be free to lead their own lives.
But the Disney movie, and I mean this with no disrespect, kind of says, yeah, no, screw that. Like, Triton was kind of a jerk, but Ariel is like 16, right? And she just runs away from her kingdom and family as well as most of her friends for a guy she just met a few days ago. Snow White, it wasn't always a cutesy story about a kid who sings with animals. First off, say, Magic Mirror, I hear you like them young. Like, can we talk about the fact that this whole movie's plot started because the Magic Mirror thought a 14-year-old girl was the fairest of the land?
Easy stuff, right?
It's even worse in the original, since the Magic Mirror started saying she was the fairest when she was 7. You could argue that his judgment was based on looks and character, but if that were the case, he never would have said the queen was the fairest. The Magic Mirror is currently under federal investigation, but the evil queen's fate is already set in stone, or iron rather, as punishment for trying to kill Snow White.
Bring back her heart in this.
the prince forces the evil queen to dance in red-hot iron shoes until she dies, which is both cruel, albeit deservedly, and weirdly specific. You might think we're gonna take this opportunity to dunk on the prince, but he actually might be a bit less weird than you think. Yeah, it's definitely weird, but this prince started smooching a dead teenager's corpse in the woods, and we can't defend that too much. But in the time Snow White takes place, this would have been a relatively normal practice to show some compassion and honor to the departed soul. It helps that the prince at least knew Snow White beforehand, too. Anyway, you slice it, he's way less unsettling here than in the Brothers Grimm version. Or any of the others, actually, since the Disney film is apparently the only one where they knew each other at all before Snow White's death. In the Brothers Grimm iteration, he takes the creep factor one step further by carting Snow White's corpse around like a body pillow. This annoyed one of his servants so much that he started hitting her in the back, which inadvertently got the apple dislodged from her throat. And Snow White just says, "Yeah, screw it, why not, I'll marry you." Hard to blame her for not questioning stuff after spending a big chunk of her adolescence living with 7 eccentric dwarves and getting assassinated by her own stepmother. Now let's talk about a tale some would say is as old as time. Beauty and the Beast. Now, in all honesty, I really don't even think I need to explain why we're including this one. It's been said a billion times before that Beauty and the Beast can be seen as a depiction of Stockholm Syndrome, but we wouldn't go that far. Belle did volunteer herself to be captured in her father's place after all. Stockholm Syndrome isn't really on the table here. What is on the table, though, is the fact that these two are definitely in need of couples therapy. It'd be one thing if this was like Shrek, where the Beast in question was just a chill guy who was misunderstood, but the Beast was kind of a jerk, frankly. Like, we get that he's insecure and feels like he can't find love, and to his credit, he was definitely trying to be better by the end of the movie. But it's rare for people to change overnight, and considering how the Beast was cursed in the first place because he was a selfish jerk, we're all the more hesitant to believe that he went from a drywall punching maniac to a perfect gentleman without some danger of relapse. But at least he and Belle have got a happy ending so far. Except, okay, I have to ask, what's gonna happen if these two have kids? If you want to marry a giant Minotaur-looking dude, go for it, Belle, but all I can think about is that one Kermit Jr. cutaway from Family Guy.
Kill me! I'm in constant pain!
Thoughts and prayers for this pair, please. Have you ever wondered why Rapunzel has such a weird name? Well, this one's seducey because while the original Rapunzel fairy tale had a happy ending, the rest of the story was a train wreck. Entangled, Rapunzel was kidnapped by Mother Gothel because of her magic healing abilities. Pretty messed up, right? Well, at least she was kidnapped in that story. Wait, no, that came out wrong. Look, what I mean is that at least her parents didn't just roll over and let it happen. In the original fairy tale, Rapunzel's mother was an addict who wouldn't eat anything but the plants her sorceress neighbor was growing.
Look at all that lovely lettuce just waiting to be picked.
Rather than growing this plant himself, or maybe just asking for some, the father decided to steal from the sorceress. When she caught him, she threatened his life, prompting him to explain his wife's condition. The two came to an agreement. He could take all the plants he needed as long as he agreed to surrender his daughter to her once she was born.
Great deal.
Now, obviously, the sorceress is awful for suggesting this, especially since she just kept Rapunzel locked in a tower once she turned 12. But the parents are arguably even worse for just letting it happen.
Are you stupid?
Both of these two were willing to give up their own daughter, one of them to save his own butt, and the other so she could keep eating the same plant 24/7.
And by the time they had their third child, the first baby was forgotten.
We haven't even mentioned the fact that the original love interest had his eyes blinded by thorns. Jeez, what is with these stories always going for the eyes? Today, we'll find that some of these old school fairy tale authors were menaces, much like the original Pinocchio. You know Jiminy Cricket, right? The friendly talking cricket, Pinocchio's iconic conscience/sidekick. Yeah, there's no wholesome musical exposition from him in the original story. Pinocchio literally kills him with a hammer during their first meeting.
Nothing can stop me now.
Like, yeah, no, it says that he didn't mean to kill him, but come on, really? That's like if you threw cheese laced with rat poison to a rat and said, "Hey, come on, I didn't mean to kill him."
It sure is.
He does redeem himself in the end, but it still comes with the underlying memory of Pinocchio having murdered a sentient cricket for basically no reason.
Being bad's a lot of fun, ain't it?
With that redemption, at least he got a better ending than the kids on Pleasure Island. Pleasure Island is one of the most messed up scenes in any Disney movie, hands down. The coachman lures little boys to a place where they can live lives of impulsive hedonism. Then, right when they least expect it, he transforms them into donkeys and sells them as slaves.
What's he think I look like? A jackass?
This is depraved enough for just a one-off scene, but while Pinocchio and a few others are spared this horrible fate, it's implied that the coachman has done this plenty of times before and shipped plenty of donkeys off without any indication of this curse being lifted. Even if the curse were to be fully lifted from all the kids, which we certainly hope was the case, it still has some scary implications. Imagine being an innocent person who bought a donkey to help them on their farm or something, only to have that donkey randomly turn into a terrified human boy. Not only would that be traumatic on both ends, but the person who bought the donkey probably wouldn't see the outside of a prison cell for a long time. In a classic case of authors hating their own protagonists, let's talk about the original tales of Mulan. The original legend of Hua Mulan had a happy ending, much like the movie. Mulan spares her father from being forced into war, brings honor to herself and her country, and is acknowledged by the troops she worked with. Some of the other versions of the story took a much darker turn though. In 1675, Chu Renhuo wrote Romance of Sui and Tang, which gave the world of Mulan crueler lore that frankly nobody asked for. Seriously, I don't know what this dude had against Mulan, but he must have hated this poor girl. Instead of the honorable ending she got in the old legend and the movie, the Sui Tang romance ended with Mulan coming home after being spared from execution to find her father dead, her mother remarried, and herself summoned to be a concubine. Faced with such a dishonorable, cruel fate, Mulan chose suicide as an alternate ending, turning an uplifting story about a girl overcoming the odds for the sake of her beloved father into an unadulterated tragedy. That said, if just one or two things about the original movie had turned out differently, it would have also ended in tragedy. Let's say, for instance, that Mulan hadn't saved Li Sheng's life earlier in the film. If you recall correctly, this good deed is what stopped Li Sheng from executing her after she was discovered. Had Mulan not saved his life, he wouldn't have any debt to repay her for, so it's not unreasonable to believe that he'd execute her, or at least hand her over to the authorities. Either way, it certainly wouldn't have been the happy ending we got from Disney. Pocahontas was one of the many stories cleaned up by Disney, because the original one is a lot less romantic. The real Pocahontas had a pretty rough life, with such adventurous experiences as being taken hostage in a war between colonizers and her own tribe, being married at 17 to a guy like a decade older than her. Yeah, not much in the way of talking animals and exciting river rides here, but even if you ignore all that stuff, somehow, here's the real kicker. Pocahontas died at the age of 21.
I followed the wrong path.
In the real world, that means her son would be without a mother at a very tender age, but in the Disney world, that still means she'd only have 2-3 years tops of her happily ever after. Now, you might remember Hercules and Megara for having one of Disney's most iconic love stories, but don't be fooled. The original Greek myth is way more screwed up than the movie lets on. In the movie, Hera is Hercules' mother, so you ready to hear what she does to him in the movie? What the? No! That's gross! She actually does something worse. You see, in the original Greek mythology, Zeus he just kind of sucked, honestly. He constantly cheated on Hera, his most prominent wife, at least.
The kid have a little fun.
This prompted Hera to curse his illegitimate offspring with all kinds of afflictions. On one occasion, she decided to strike Hercules with a fit of madness that caused him to murder Megara and their own children. Imagine waking up after a nap only to find out that you had the blood of your entire family on your hands. That's like the definition of a fate worse than death. Speaking of death, let's talk about Hades. While Megara had a happy ending in the movie, with her soul intertwined with Hades, you have to wonder what might happen if he were to ever escape the river Styx. I mean, he's at least still able to talk while he's down there. Who knows if he'd be able to strike some kind of deal and get his revenge. Tarzan's villain had a much less ambiguous fate than a lot of Disney villains, but what about the man himself? If we're talking about the movie, things ended up just fine for Tarzan. I mean, sure, they definitely could have gone worse if he felt like Jane was a threat when his mind was still all gorilla-ified, but he got a happy ending. That's more than we can say for his book iteration. In the original Tarzan of the Apes story, Tarzan's story goes in a way less kid-friendly direction. First off, Kristijan goes one step further than just not liking Tarzan. He straight up tries to kill him, forcing Tarzan to pull a "no you" and take the tribe leader's life. If that weren't bad enough, he adds people to his kill count when one of them kills Kala. So yeah, that's both of Tarzan's adoptive parents brutally killed, one of them by Tarzan himself.
It can't get any worse, can it?
That's not to mention the fact that in the original book, Tarzan doesn't even end up with Jane. She ends up engaged to Tarzan's cousin, who unknowingly inherited the estate Tarzan would have gotten. Despite being given a chance to at least be single and rich, he passed up on all that for the sake of Jane's happiness. Speaking of Jane, how is stuff going for her? Well, I mean, she's got a whole sequel dedicated to her marriage to Tarzan, so I guess it's going pretty well.
That was very nice, Tarzan.
The only problem is just the tiny, almost not even worth mentioning detail that everyone she and her elderly father ever knew believes them to be lost at sea and presumably dead. Now let's talk about Milo and Kida from Atlantis, The Lost Empire. First of all, super underrated movie. Go check it out if you haven't. But while Milo and Kida end up married and going on all kinds of adventures of their own, that doesn't change the fact that everyone except the few people Milo worked with to discover Atlantis believed them to be lost at sea and presumed dead. Despite this, everyone got a happy ending except for the one guy who didn't deserve one, so all is well, right? Sure, yeah, until you realize that Kida is like 8,500 years old. She's going to outlive Milo by hundreds of years, if not thousands. Happily Ever After seems to have a lot more disclaimers than I expected, honestly. But if it cheers you up, just know that Audrey adopted Milo's pet cat in the final scene, and I find that very sweet. Next, why don't we talk about a criminally underrated Disney movie, Treasure Planet, and more specifically what happened to Jim Hawkins and John Silver after the movie. Well, according to this one video game that came out after the movie's release, Jim's doing pretty well for himself. 5 years after the movie took place, he graduated from the Naval Academy and commands an Imperial patrol ship. That just leaves the question of John Silver. And while his relationship with Jim made him a much better person in the canceled sequel, Jim was planned to have been the head of a smuggling ring, primarily helping the heroes take down the villain for the sake of stealing a ship he'd acquired. Plus, in the aforementioned game, he was implied to have fully reformed over time, and having it take a few years actually makes his redemption feel a little more genuine. Yeah, I guess not all these fates are so bad then. I do hope some of these entries get a little less brutal though. Who better to test that theory than Winnie the Pooh? Everyone loves Pooh Bear, and nobody loves him more than Christopher Robin. But we have to wonder what the 100-Acre Woods is gonna be like when old CR goes off to college. In the Christopher Robin live-action movie, we saw him and his silly old bear reunite after apparently years of not visiting.
Pooh? Christopher Robin.
While Pooh was forgiving, just happy to see Christopher Robin after so many years, it's clear that Christopher is at a much busier, more grown-up phase of his life.
But it's getting late and I'm very busy. I haven't got time to help you, Luka. I'm on a deadline.
Pooh is content. Sure, he's probably going to be happy no matter what his ending is. The guy just wants to eat honey and vibe with his animal buddies. But it's sad to know that eventually Christopher Robin will stop coming by the 100-Acre Woods altogether, and poor Pooh and the gang won't really understand why. I don't believe the concept of mortality really exists in the 100-Acre Woods, and if it does, we as a society need to protect the childlike wonder of Pooh from that reality at all costs. Now for the inevitable, let's talk about Wish for a minute. Asha got a happy ending, and hers was a very black and white one. There's really no room to interpret some kind of a dark twist happening to her later in life. What is dark, however, is how things ended up for Magnifico.
That is not funny. Get me out of here at once.
For a guy who was hyped up as Disney's return to classic, unapologetically evil villains, Magnifico actually didn't seem all that unreasonable. The villainy of this guy should have come from the fact that he's a control freak with delusions of grandeur.
Am I glowing? I feel as if I am. Yes?
But the whole, maybe we shouldn't grant every wish thing, that's totally reasonable. In fact, Asha going against that so vehemently is the more unreasonable thing. We get that she wanted her old grandfather to get his wish granted, but expecting Magnifico to grant everyone's wishes? What if someone wishes for slavery to be legalized again? Someone could wish for an active volcano to erupt.
So most of these wishes will never be granted?
Magnifico lets you live here for free and doesn't even charge you rent, and this is how you thank him. For shame, Asha. This guy's motive was so reasonable, they literally had to make him get possessed by dark magic to make him a proper threat, like an actual evil threat. I don't get it. Now we move on to the Snow Queen, who you might know as Elsa. Now, full disclosure, Frozen is a completely different story from The Snow Queen. While it is loosely based on it, the overall plots couldn't be any more different. The same goes for Elsa and the original Snow Queen. While Elsa is a tragically misunderstood girl with powers she struggles to control, the Snow Queen is, I don't even know. Basically, she kidnaps a little boy because he has the final piece of a mirror stuck in his eye. If you aren't confused enough already, don't worry. It gets weirder. She proceeds to kiss this actual child twice so he'll forget about his family and friends, focusing only on helping her spell the word eternal in ice.
No more kisses. Sometimes the kiss of winter may be too much for mortals.
I'm not even gonna pretend like I understand what kind of scheme she was cooking up. All I know is that the Snow Queen definitely has a few more charges of child endangerment than Elsa. Still, Kai did manage to escape and have a happy life in his village. The Lion King is one of the most beloved Disney films out there, so let's make like modern Disney and see how quickly we can ruin it for you. For those unaware, The Lion King was inspired by Hamlet, one of William Shakespeare's most popular and recognizable plays. The talking animals aren't the only difference though. If you want to know what The Lion King would be like if it were fully based on Hamlet, just imagine that Simba was suicidal suicidally depressed throughout the entire second act of the movie, slowly going insane as he comes to the realization that his uncle betrayed him and killed his father. Instead of funny singing animals to cheer him up and teach him how to eat bugs, he'd be met with a slow and steady descent into madness that would ultimately kill him and everyone he loves. Yeah, that's the other thing. Everyone dies in Hamlet. Well, every main character at least. His love interest, Ophelia, kills herself after being rejected. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, his childhood friends, end up being used as spies to try and figure out why Hamlet was going crazy, which resulted in the latter pulling some strings to have them executed. That would be like if Timon and Pumbaa were hired by Scar to spy on Simba, and Simba just killed them once he found out about it. That's just scratching the surface of all the tragedies Hamlet went through. Needless to say, we're glad the Lion King didn't turn out like that, especially considering how much worse it could be considering Simba is, you know, a lion. He wouldn't have to be underhanded once he went crazy. Swapping orders of execution, honorable duels, who cares about that? If he were really driven mad, Simba could literally just eat or maul his enemies. I remembered something. I'm a lion. I can kill you. He's way stronger than Scar, so taking the throne back by force wouldn't be any issue for Simba.
No, Scar. I'm not like you.
If he just had a little bit less of a conscience, this movie would have played out a heck of a lot differently. The Fox and the Hound is one of the entries that takes the most creative liberties compared to its original story. The Fox and the Hound is already one of the more bittersweet Disney movies, since the titular duo ends up separated in the end and moving on to different phases of life. But, like, at least they get more of a life, right? In the original story, Todd and Copper both just straight up die. Honestly, that doesn't even scratch the surface of how dark this book was. The title and the main duo's names are basically the only things that bear any similarity to the Disney movie. In the book, Todd dies during a fox hunt, and Copper gets an even more brutal end. After the hunter is forced to move off of his land and live in a nursing home, the book ends with him resolving to put Copper down since he won't be able to take his old hunting buddy with him. I don't know what it is with Disney choosing the most absolutely brutal books to turn into beloved childhood movies, but it's both tragic and weirdly hilarious to see how different they can be. I only hope no children ended up reading this book to see the cute animal buddies they enjoyed in the movie. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is one of the few Disney movies that doesn't really have much of a happy ending for its protagonist. After Quasi risked his neck to save Esmeralda, he realizes she'll only be happy if she's with Phoebus. As a result, Quasimodo joins their hands and remains content to be a friend to the pair. But the reality of him never being able to experience love with the woman he fell in love with still hurts. Straight to DVD sequels aside, Quasi's one of the few Disney heroes who didn't get the girl. But I'm sure we can all agree that even if he isn't a Disney prince, he's definitely a Disney king. In the book, though, man, he might as well have married 100 Esmeraldas in the movie for how much worse off he was. First off, in the book, Frollo actually succeeded in getting Esmeralda hanged. He murdered Phoebus and framed Esmeralda for it, killing her after she refused to be with him. Resultantly, Quasi pushed him off the cathedral in a fit of rage, and no, that isn't the sad part, Frollo deserved that. What wasn't deserved was the tragic demise Quasimodo faced. The book ends with the implied revelation that Quasi spent his final days on Earth searching for Esmeralda's deceased corpse, so that even if she turned out to be dead, which she was, he could hold her just a little while longer. The fact that this deformed skeleton was cradling another skeleton in its arms tells us that Quasi was so depressed that he didn't even care to eat anymore. The only thing that could even remotely give him comfort was holding the dead body of the woman he loved. A woman he was painfully aware could never love him back. Unless it was actually a different deformed skeleton. Yeah, that's totally the real ending. There's no proof that Quasimodo didn't get married and live a happy life elsewhere on a farm that grows cotton candy and puppies. That's exactly what happened, in fact. And nobody's gonna convince me otherwise because I at least want this video to have a happy ending. Yay, happy for everyone! Whee!